My day started the way a lot of my mornings start. Too early, too quiet, and with that faint, anxious feeling you get when your job depends on systems you can't afford to have fail. It was 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, still dark enough that the garage lights looked harsh and clinical. I pulled into the underground lot beneath our office building, half awake, coffee cooling in the cup holder, already thinking about the day's priorities, a vendor onboarding ticket, a badge audit that HR had been meaning to do for months, and an irritated email from finance about why the access logs were too technical to understand. I worked in operations, not the glamorous kind. The kind nobody notices until the gates don't open, the badge reader blinks red, or a company asset goes missing and suddenly, everyone's looking for someone to blame. I'd been at the company almost 7 years, long enough to learn two things. First, people don't argue with facts until facts threaten what they want. Second, the most dangerous coworkers aren't the loud ones. It's the ones who can smile while they set you up and make you look like the problem. Her name was Megan. If you've ever had someone like her in your office, you know the type. She wasn't incompetent. She was worse than that. Competent enough to be believable, charming enough to recruit allies, and ruthless enough to keep pushing until you either moved out of her way or got crushed. A month earlier, our company had announced cost controls, that corporate phrase that means layoffs without saying layoffs. Budgets froze, raises paused. People started guarding their jobs like they were life rafts. And that's when Megan started orbiting me. At first it was small. Hey Ethan, can you show me how you pull those gate logs? Or, who approves vehicle assignments again? Or my favorite, you're so good at this stuff. You should really be in management. I didn't think much of it. I was used to being the person everyone asked when they wanted to understand something technical without doing the work. I'd rather answer a question than watch someone break a system and pretend it wasn't their fault. But the questions didn't stop. Then the jokes started. Little comments in meetings. Quiet enough to sound harmless, sharp enough to land. If Ethan doesn't respond, we'll be locked out forever. Can we get someone with admin access who actually shares it? Or she'd laugh and say, I'm kidding. Like that erased the fact she'd just told a room full of people I was hoarding control. I ignored it, because ignoring things is what you do when you don't want to look paranoid. And I wasn't paranoid, I was just paying attention, because something else had been happening too. Our parking garage used a 2-layer system, badge access to enter on foot, and plate recognition to open the vehicle gate. In theory, you needed both, badge permission tied to your profile and your license plate on the approved list. In practice, it was only secure if people followed process. And process, in our company, was more of a suggestion. A week before that Tuesday morning, I'd noticed an odd pattern while running a monthly audit. 3 failed gate entries at weird hours, 2:13 a.m., 2:26 a.m., 3:01 a.m., all tied to one badge profile. Megan's. That didn't make sense. Megan didn't work late. Megan barely came in before 9:30, usually with a smoothie and a story about traffic. So I did what I always do. I didn't jump to conclusions. I pulled the logs. I compared them to camera time stamps. I checked the badge swipes at the pedestrian entrance. Her badge had pinged the vehicle gate, but it hadn't been used at the foot entrance, meaning someone tried to use her credentials without actually walking through the building. That's not normal. It could have been a mistake, a misread plate, a glitch. But then I saw the part that made my stomach tighten. The failed attempts weren't random. They were followed by one successful entry. By a different badge, 3 minutes later. A badge belonging to a junior supervisor in facilities named Rick. Rick wasn't a bad guy, but he was the kind of guy who approved requests because he didn't want conflict. And the request that had been approved that night? A temporary vehicle access update. No notes, no reason, just a quick approval. The vehicle plate on the request wasn't Megan's. It was mine. I stared at the screen for a long time, hoping I was misunderstanding it. Because if my plate had been associated with someone else's access change request, even temporarily, that meant one thing. Someone was trying to create a record that my vehicle belonged to them. Not physically, on paper. And if you can make the system say something is yours, you can make everyone treat it like it's true. I remember sitting back in my chair and hearing my own heartbeat in the quiet office. It was late. The building was mostly empty, the kind of empty that makes you realize how vulnerable systems are when nobody's watching. I didn't confront Megan. I didn't accuse Rick. I didn't email HR with a dramatic subject line. Because I've learned that if you alert someone who's setting a trap, they don't stop. They just build a better one. Instead, I did something simple. I tightened the permissions. Not in a way that would look like retaliation, just in a way that forced the system to follow policy. I removed the temporary override option from anyone who wasn't fleet operations. I added a requirement that any vehicle reassignment needed 2 approvals. Fleet plus security. And I put an alert on my plate so that if any change request touched it, I'd get notified instantly. All normal controls. All defensible. The kind of thing that if anyone complained about, would make them look guilty. Then I went home, tried to sleep, told myself I was overreacting, and I might have believed that if I hadn't seen Megan's expression the next morning when she walked past my desk and said, softly, like a joke that wasn't a joke, "Hey, Ethan, you drive the black sedan, right?" I looked up. "Yeah," she smiled. "Just checking." And she walked away. That's when I knew this wasn't an accident. Fast forward to Tuesday, 6 a.m., the underground garage. I rolled down the ramp and slowed as I approached the gate, expecting it to lift, like it always did. Instead, headlights flashed in my face. A car was parked sideways in the lane, blocking the entrance like someone had deliberately built a wall. And standing next to it, with her arms folded like she owned the place, was Megan. She stepped forward as soon as she saw me, and I could tell from her posture that she wasn't here to talk. She was here to win. I stopped my car inches from hers, put it in park, sat there for half a second trying to decide if this was real. Then she walked up to my window and knocked hard. Not a polite tap. A knock that was meant to make you feel small. I lowered the window and the cold garage air hit my face. Megan leaned in, smiling, and said in a voice that sounded almost practiced, "Morning, Ethan. Hand over the keys." I blinked. "What?" "The keys," she repeated louder this time, like I was being difficult. "Management said it's reassigned. This car is a company asset." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't laugh. I just stared at her, trying to understand how she could say it so confidently. Because she wasn't just asking. She was accusing me, right here in the dark garage, of sitting in something that didn't belong to me. And that was the part that chilled me. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. I looked past her shoulder and saw the small black dome camera above the gate. Then another one near the pedestrian door. Then the little red light blinking on the intercom panel. The garage was recording everything, and Megan knew that. She wanted it recorded. She wanted evidence of me refusing to comply. She wanted a narrative. So I did what she didn't expect. I exhaled slowly, like I was exhausted, and I said, "Okay." Megan's smile widened just slightly, like she'd already won. She held out her hand, and I didn't move. I just looked past her, toward the gate reader, because the access had already changed, and 10 minutes later she would realize that the system wasn't going to back her story. It was going to expose it, because I wasn't paranoid, I was prepared. And somewhere above us, the security desk was about to notice a blockage at the gate. Right when their logs started throwing flags, not for me, for her. I stayed in my car, not because I was scared of her, not because I didn't know what to do, because the moment you step out, it stops being about policy and starts being about personalities, and Megan was better at personalities than anyone I'd ever met. She leaned closer to the window, her hands still out like she was waiting for a valet. "Keys," she said again, slower this time, like she was teaching a child. Don't make this difficult. I nodded once, calm on purpose. Okay, I repeated. Then call Fleet. Have them confirm the reassignment. I'll wait. Her smile flickered. She hadn't expected a sentence with process in it. I already did, she snapped. Then she immediately softened her face and tried a different tone. Look, Ethan, I'm not trying to embarrass you, but this is happening. Management already signed off. That's the trick people like her use. They say management the way some people say God. Like it's a force you can't question. I glanced at her car. The angle was deliberate, perfectly blocking the lane so I couldn't pull forward or reverse without scraping. Her driver door was open like she planned to leave it there as long as needed. She'd chosen the time, the place, and the pressure point. And she'd done it where cameras could catch me reacting. I didn't give her the reaction. I looked past her again, toward the gate. The scanner was blinking red, waiting. I could have swiped my badge and left. I could have driven out and avoided the confrontation. But if I left, she'd spin it as Ethan fled when confronted. So I stayed. Okay, I said, keeping my voice flat. If you're right, Fleet will confirm. If you're wrong, you're blocking a secured entrance and demanding keys to a company asset. Megan's eyes hardened. For a second, the mask slipped, and I saw what was underneath. Irritation that I wasn't panicking. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her posture changed, like she'd just remembered she had an audience. She raised her voice, not shouting, projecting, the way you do when you want something to sound official. Ethan, this isn't personal. You're just refusing a reassignment. I could almost hear the email she'd already drafted. I did the one thing she didn't want. I hit the call button on the garage intercom. A small speaker crackled. Security desk, a man's voice said. Go ahead. Megan's head snapped toward the panel. She didn't move fast enough to stop me. Hi, I said. This is Ethan Harris. I'm at the vehicle gate. Someone is blocking the entrance and demanding keys to my assigned company vehicle. Can you send someone down and log this as an incident? The silence on the line was immediate, heavy. Then, repeat that? Megan stepped between me and the panel, like her body could block sound. This is a misunderstanding, she said loudly, forcing a laugh. We're working it out. I kept my eyes forward. It's not a misunderstanding. I'd like it documented. The voice came back, tighter now. Copy. Stay where you are. Officer is en route. Megan turned back to me, her smile gone completely. Why would you do that? She hissed. I shrugged, still calm. Because you're asking for keys to a car you don't have authority over. And I'm done having conversations that disappear the moment someone else walks in. She stared at me like she couldn't believe I was making her play by the rules. Then she did exactly what I expected. She went for the shortcut, pressure through hierarchy. She lifted her phone, walked 2 steps away, close enough for the cameras to still frame her, far enough to pretend she was having a private call, and put it to her ear. Hi, Mark, she said sweetly. Yeah, I'm at the garage. Ethan is refusing the vehicle reassignment and he's making a scene. A scene. I was sitting in my car, hands visible, voice even. But making a scene is what you say when you want HR to picture you as volatile. I knew Mark. He was our director of facilities, a man who hated conflict so much, he treated it like a contagious disease. If Megan had gotten to him first with a story, he'd do whatever ended the discomfort fastest. Megan kept talking, nodding like she was receiving instructions. Okay, yes, I understand. I'll tell him. She ended the call and walked back up, chin lifted. Mark said to give me the keys, she announced, loud enough for the cameras. Right now. I didn't move. I just asked, did he email that? Or is this one of those trust me approvals? Her face twitched. He doesn't have time to email everything. Then he can take 2 minutes and call Fleet Operations, I said. Because Fleet controls assignments, not you, not Mark. Megan exhaled hard and turned her head like she was praying for patience. A performance. Then she leaned down again, closer, and dropped her voice to something colder. You think you're safe because you play nice, she said. But you're not. You're just slow. That landed. Not because it scared me, because it confirmed everything. She wasn't improvising, she'd already decided I was in her way. Before I could reply, footsteps echoed from the stairwell. A security officer came into view. Frank, an older guy who'd been in that building longer than I had. He walked with that steady, annoyed pace of someone who's handled too many misunderstandings between grown adults. He took one look at the blocked lane and his expression tightened. "What's going on?" he asked. Megan immediately switched back to friendly. "Hi, Frank. So sorry. This is just a vehicle reassignment issue. Ethan's upset." I didn't correct her emotionally. I corrected her factually. "Frank?" I said, still seated. She parked sideways to block the gate and demanded I hand over my keys. She says management reassigned my vehicle to her. I asked her to confirm through Fleet. She refused. Frank looked at Megan, then at her car, then up at the cameras. "Is that accurate?" he asked her. Megan laughed again, too bright. "He's exaggerating," she said. "I'm just trying to do my job. We have a lot of changes and—" Frank cut her off, calm but firm. "Move your vehicle out of the lane." Megan blinked. "What?" "You're blocking a secured entrance," he said. "Move it. Now." She looked like she wanted to argue, but arguing with security doesn't play well on footage. So she complied, stomping back to her car and pulling it forward with an angry squeal of tires. The lane opened. I could have driven away then, but I didn't. Because this wasn't just about getting to work. It was about the record. Frank walked up to my window. "Do you want to file this as an incident?" "Yes," I said. Megan spun around. "Are you serious?" Frank ignored her and asked, "Your name and badge number?" I gave them. Megan's face went pale for half a second, and then she recovered and shoved her phone toward Frank. "Here," she said, tone sharp. "I have approval." Frank glanced at her screen and frowned. It wasn't an approval. It was a forwarded Slack message. A screenshot, actually. No official ticket. No fleet authorization. No assignment record. Just words. Frank looked back at her. "This isn't documentation." Megan's voice rose. "It came from Mark." Frank nodded once. "Then Mark can explain it. I'm logging this as unauthorized interference with a secured access point. Both of you will be contacted." Megan stared at him like she couldn't believe the building wasn't automatically siding with her. Then she turned on me. "This is what you do," she said, loud again for the cameras. "You make everything a formal complaint because you can't handle change." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I did the one thing she hated most. I stayed calm while she unraveled, because calm looks like truth on video. And Megan was still thinking this was about a car. She didn't understand yet that the only reason I was so steady was because I'd already set the trap she'd walked into. By the time we reached the lobby, my phone buzzed with a notification, a system alert. A request had just been submitted to modify my vehicle access profile. Submitted from Megan's account, and it auto-failed, because the permissions had already changed. And then a second notification hit, almost immediately after. A new alert, not from the gate system, from compliance. Because anything that touched fleet assets and access overrides now flagged automatically. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Megan was walking ahead of me, shoulders stiff, trying to look like she'd won. She had no idea she'd just triggered the one department nobody in our company ever wanted to wake up. And the worst part for her was simple. Compliance didn't care about her story. They only cared about what the logs said. And the logs were already talking. I didn't even make it to my desk before I stopped in the hallway and read the alerts again. One was from our access platform. Request submitted. Vehicle profile modification. Plate plus assignment link. Initiator, Megan L. Status, failed. Insufficient permissions. The second was the one that mattered. Compliance flag, fleet asset access override attempt. Case auto-created. That one hit different, because compliance at our company wasn't like HR. HR cared about tone. HR cared about how it felt. HR cared about making problems quiet. Compliance cared about one thing: whether the company could get sued, audited, or embarrassed. And when compliance got involved, people stopped smiling. I stood there for a second with my phone in my hand, realizing something I didn't want to admit to myself. Megan didn't block my car at 6 a.m. because she thought she'd get the car. She blocked it because she thought she'd get a record of me refusing a reassignment, a record of me being difficult, something she could hand to a manager like Mark and say, "See, Ethan's a problem. He won't cooperate. He's controlling access. He's hoarding authority. He's resisting leadership." And if she could sell that story, she wouldn't need my keys. She'd get what she really wanted, my seat. I walked into the office and did the opposite of what most people do when they're shaken. I didn't vent. I didn't gossip. I didn't run to coworkers and ask, "Can you believe this?" I went straight to my desk, logged into the ticketing system, and started building a timeline. Not because I was emotional, because I'd learned the hard way. If you don't write the story first, someone else will write it for you. I opened a new incident ticket and titled it something boring on purpose: Vehicle Gate Interference, Unauthorized Asset Demand. Boring titles survive internal politics. Dramatic titles get you labeled difficult. Then I attached what I already had, the system alert showing. Megan initiated the access modification request, the auto-fail response that proved she didn't have legitimate permissions, the compliance case number that auto-generated right after, a request to security for footage retention from 5:45 a.m. to 6:30 a.m., including audio from the intercom if available. And then I did the most important part. I asked for a hold, not a please keep it, a hold. Because once you use that word, once you say, "Please place footage and logs under retention hold due to potential investigation," people stop deleting things casually. The moment I hit submit, my hands were steady, but my stomach wasn't, because I could already imagine Megan in her office, typing the email she'd been preparing for weeks, and I knew exactly how it would read. Subject: Concern, Ethan refusing reassignment. Unsafe behavior in garage. It would have just enough truth to be believable and just enough spin to make me look unstable. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was an internal message from Frank in security. Logged incident. Video captured. Let me know if compliance requests it. It was small, but it was the first moment that morning where I felt something shift in my chest. Not relief, more like clarity. Because for once, I wasn't the only person who saw it. I wasn't alone with my gut feeling. I had a record. And that's when I realized the bigger thing. Megan wasn't powerful. She was unchecked. She was used to people avoiding conflict because it was inconvenient. She counted on the fact that most adults would rather lose quietly than fight publicly. And I had been one of those adults for too long. I sat back, looked at my calendar, and thought about all the little moments I'd ignored over the past month. The jokes in meetings, the weird questions about access logs, the way she'd started casually dropping my name into conversations like she was managing me, the time she asked Rick from facilities, right in front of me, "Who can approve a temporary vehicle reassignment if fleet isn't available?" Rick had laughed awkwardly and said, "I can if it's urgent." Megan had smiled like she'd just been handed a knife. Back then, I'd told myself it was harmless. Now it looked like a rehearsal, and then, like someone had flipped a light switch, another memory came back. The night I tightened permissions. I hadn't done it randomly. I'd done it because I'd found the audit trail where someone tried to associate my plate with a temporary update. At the time, I assumed the request was sloppy. Now I understood it was a test. They wanted to see if they could move my asset record around without me noticing. And when they saw I noticed, when the request started failing, Megan escalated to something physical, loud and public, a confrontation, a performance. Because if you can't beat the logs, you try to beat the person. At 9:12 a.m., my manager, Brian, called me into a small conference room. Brian was the kind of manager who meant well but hated anything that sounded like drama. He didn't like problems. He liked normalcy. He liked clean dashboards and quiet teams. Megan was already inside, sitting with her legs crossed, a notebook open like she was in a formal meeting. HR was there too, Lydia, holding a folder, trying to look neutral. The air felt staged. Brian cleared his throat. Ethan, this morning was, not ideal. Megan sighed like she was tired of me. I just needed the keys. It's a company vehicle. I was told it was reassigned. I didn't respond to her. I looked at Brian. Who told her that? Brian hesitated. His eyes flicked to HR, then to Megan, then back to me. Lydia stepped in. We're not here to debate authority. We're here to de-escalate and move forward. That sentence was so familiar, it almost made me laugh. De-escalate in HR language means, help us keep this from becoming a formal mess. I nodded once. Okay, I want to move forward too. Megan's expression softened, like she thought I was about to fold. Then I placed my phone on the table and slid it toward Lydia. Can you read the initiator name on that access modification request? Lydia glanced down and her eyebrows pulled together. Brian leaned in. His face changed as he read it. Megan didn't move at first. Then she smiled tightly. That's those systems autofill names. People use my profile sometimes. Who? I asked, still calm. Who used your profile at 6:07 a.m. to request a change to my vehicle assignment? Megan opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Brian. Brian shifted in his chair. Megan, did you submit that? Her voice rose just slightly. I tried to fix what Ethan broke. He's been changing access without telling anyone. The gate didn't work the way it should, and I stopped her with one sentence. The gate worked fine for my badge. It didn't work for your request. Silence. The kind that isn't comfortable. The kind that makes people look down at the table. Lydia cleared her throat. Ethan, why was the permission changed? Because that was the angle. If they couldn't argue about Megan's behavior, they'd argue about mine. I didn't get defensive. I stayed factual. Because there were repeated attempts to modify vehicle access records outside Fleet's process. I tightened controls to match policy. I can show the audit trail. Brian looked uneasy. Was it involved? I'm not IT, I said. I'm ops. Fleet access controls fall under my scope, and the change is documented. Megan leaned back, arms crossed now. So you admit you changed access? Yes, I said. And it prevented unauthorized modifications, which is why your request failed, which is why compliance got flagged. That last word, compliance, made the room go still. Lydia's eyes lifted. Compliance got flagged? I nodded. Auto case created at 6:09 a.m. I have the case number. Megan's face didn't go pale. It went blank. And in that blankness, I saw the first real crack. Because she wasn't thinking about HR anymore. She was thinking about the one department that doesn't negotiate. Brian's voice dropped. Why is compliance involved? Because a fleet asset reassignment attempted through improper access triggers audit risk, I said, which is exactly why I tightened permissions in the first place. Lydia picked up her folder like she suddenly remembered she had responsibilities. We'll need documentation. You'll have it, I said. Then I looked at Megan, really looked at her, not with anger, with the realization that she'd been building this for weeks, and she'd counted on everyone being too polite to stop her. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a coworker conflict. This was a calculated attempt to frame me as uncooperative, strip my responsibilities, and take control of the systems I managed. Not because she loved the work, because she loved the leverage. That morning, I stopped trying to be reasonable with someone unreasonable. I stopped thinking of it as a misunderstanding. I started treating it like what it was, an attempt. At 11:40 a.m., an email hit my inbox from compliance with a calendar invite attached. Subject: Fleet Asset Access Override Review, Case Intake. Attendees included me, security, fleet ops, and Megan. And at the bottom, one more name I hadn't expected. Mark, Director of Facilities. I stared at the invite for a long time. Because if Mark was on it, then Megan hadn't been acting alone. And that meant the next part wasn't going to be awkward. It was going to be destructive. The compliance invite wasn't for next week. It was for 1:30 p.m. the same day. No buffer. No! Let's circle back. No time for Megan to rehearse a cleaner story. And that was the first time all morning I felt something close to satisfaction. Not because I wanted revenge, but because urgency is where liars start slipping. I walked into conference room 4B with a folder in my hand that I'd built in less than 3 hours. Incident ticket number, access logs, screenshots, timestamps, and the security hold confirmation. Nothing emotional, nothing editorial, just sequence. Megan was already there, sitting 2 seats away from Mark. Mark looked worse than he had in the garage story Megan told on the phone. Not angry, not confident, just tense. His eyes didn't meet mine. He kept checking his watch like he was waiting for a fire alarm to save him. Frank from security came in next, carrying a laptop. Fleet Ops arrived with a woman named Dana. She had that calm, exhausted expression of someone who's been cleaning up other people's quick decisions for years. Then compliance walked in. Not Lydia from HHR. Not a manager trying to smooth things over. Compliance was 2 people, a director named Priya and an analyst named Sean. Priya didn't smile. She didn't ask anyone how their day was going. She sat down, opened a notebook, and said, "Case intake. We're recording minutes. This is a fact-finding meeting. If you don't know something, say you don't know. If you guess, I'll treat it as misinformation. Understood?" Everyone murmured yes. Megan smiled anyway, like charm could bend policy. Priya started with the simplest question in the world. At 6:07 a.m., a request was initiated to modify a fleet asset access profile associated with plate, ending in 429, she said. The request failed due to insufficient permissions. The initiator account was Megan L. Megan. Did you initiate that request? Megan tilted her head. I was trying to correct a system issue. Ethan had changed access. Priya didn't react. That's not my question. Megan blinked, still smiling. Yes, I submitted it. But only because, thank you, Priya said, and wrote it down. Now, why was that request submitted without a fleet assignment ticket? Megan looked at Mark like he was supposed to answer. Mark cleared his throat. Facilities sometimes handles urgent access needs when fleet is unavailable. Dana from Fleet Ops spoke for the first time, voice flat. No, facilities does not assign fleet assets. They can request. Fleet approves. That's how we maintain chain of custody. Mark's jaw tightened. It was urgent. Priya turned to him. Urgent for what? Mark hesitated. Executive coverage. We had a visitor. Megan needed reliable transportation. Donna stared at him. Then she uses a rental, or you request a pool vehicle. You don't reassign someone else's assigned vehicle by ambushing them in a garage. Frank quietly slid his laptop forward. We have video, he said, and intercom audio. Megan's smile finally thinned. Priya nodded once. We'll review after we establish the approval chain. She looked at me. Ethan, you changed access control parameters yesterday. Explain what you changed and why, without commentary. I took a breath and kept it clean. Last week, during routine audit, I found multiple after-hours vehicle gate attempts tied to Megan's badge profile, and a temporary override request that referenced my plate. The request path included a facilities supervisor approval, but no fleet ticket. I changed permissions so that temporary vehicle access overrides require Fleet Plus security approval per policy. I documented the change in the change log and attached it to the access control ticket. Priya didn't nod. She just asked, Did you remove anyone's legitimate access? No, I said. I removed a bypass option. Everyone's standard access remained. Only override requests were restricted. Donna added, That's consistent with fleet policy. Priya turned to Mark. Mark, why was facilities approving vehicle reassignment overrides? Mark's face flushed. We weren't reassigning, we were facilitating. Priya's eyes stayed steady. Facilitating what, specifically? Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. He glanced at Megan again. Megan jumped in fast. This is being blown out of proportion, she said. Ethan is territorial. He refuses to share control. I was told, by management, that I could use the vehicle today. Priya held up a hand like she was stopping traffic. Who told you? Megan's voice stayed bright. Mark. Every head turned to Mark. Mark's lips parted slightly. That's... Priya didn't let him find a soft landing. Mark, did you direct Megan to obtain Ethan's keys? Mark looked down at the table. I told her the vehicle would be reassigned. Priya's pen paused. Dana from Fleet Ops leaned forward. You cannot reassign a fleet asset without fleet. You also cannot direct an employee to physically block another employee's vehicle. That's not policy. That's liability. Mark's eyes darted to HR's empty chair, like he wished Lydia was there to call it a misunderstanding. Priya flipped a page in her notebook. Now we address intent, she said calmly. Because the system didn't just flag a bad process. It flagged an attempt to create a record of reassignment without authorization. She looked at Sean. He tapped his keyboard and turned his screen slightly so Priya could see. Case history shows 3 prior failed attempts over the last 7 days to modify the same plate association, Priya said, reading. All before 4 a.m. 2 originate from Megan's account. 1 originates from a facilities supervisor account. Name, Rick. Mark's shoulders stiffened. Priya looked at him again. Why is Rick doing this? Mark's voice went thin. I'll have to ask him. Frank spoke quietly. Rick approved what came through. He didn't create it. We can see the submitter. Priya nodded. And the submitter was Megan. Multiple times. Megan's voice sharpened. I told you Ethan broke the system. Dana cut in. No, Ethan hardened it. You were trying to use a shortcut and you got caught by controls. Megan's composure cracked. She turned to Dana, then to Priya. You're acting like I tried to steal a car, she said louder now. It's a company asset. Priya didn't raise her voice. You attempted to change custody records and access authorization without approval, she said. Then you physically blocked access to a secured entrance and demanded keys. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a pattern. The room went quiet in a way that felt heavy. Then Priya said the sentence that made Megan's eyes widen. Frank, I want the video. Frank clicked a file. On the screen, there she was. Garage lights, early darkness, her car sideways, her hand out at my window. Her voice came through the speaker, clearer than I expected. Hand over the keys. Management said it's mine. Then my voice even. Okay, call Fleet and confirm. I'll wait. Then her tone shifting, performing for the camera. Ethan is refusing reassignment. You could hear the intercom, the security desk, Frank's arrival, the order to move her car, and the moment that mattered most, her saying it, again on video, with absolute confidence. Mark said to give me the keys, right now. Megan's face on the live screen looked nothing like the Megan sitting in the room. On the recording, she looked aggressive, cornering, in control. In the conference room, she looked smaller by the second. Priya paused the video and turned to Megan. Megan, she said, stand up. Megan blinked. What? Stand up? Priya repeated, voice unchanged. Megan stood. Priya looked at her the way you look at a door that doesn't open. You are not authorized to request fleet reassignment. You are not authorized to create or simulate custody records. You escalated to physical interference, Priya said. Effective immediately, your access is suspended pending investigation. You will be escorted to collect your personal items and return your badge. Megan's mouth opened. No sound came out at first. Then, you can't do that. This is retaliation. Priya didn't flinch. This is control. Sit down. Frank will escort you. Frank stood calmly, like he'd done this before. Megan looked around the table, searching for someone to rescue her. Mark stared at the tabletop. Dana didn't move. And for the first time, Megan didn't have an audience that cared about her tone. Frank guided her toward the door. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She did something worse, she whispered, quick and venomous as she passed me. This isn't over. I didn't respond, because I didn't need to. The system was responding for me. Priya watched Megan leave, then turned back to Mark. Mark, she said, you're now a subject of this case. We'll need your written statement today. Your administrative access privileges are suspended pending review. IT will handle it. Fleet and security will coordinate. Mark's face drained of color. Priya, she raised her hand again. Stop. You'll speak to legal if you want counsel. Right now, you'll answer questions. Mark swallowed hard. Okay. And then the chaos spread the way it always does when someone pulls one thread and finds the whole sweater unraveling. Sean spoke without looking up from his laptop. One more thing, he said. While reviewing the override attempts, we found 2 other plates associated with unauthorized temporary custody changes over the last quarter. Same approval path. Dana exhaled like she'd been punched. You're kidding? Sean shook his head. No. Same pattern. Priya closed her notebook slowly. That, she said, means this is bigger than a garage argument. She looked at me. Ethan, you said you placed an alert on your plate. Was that the only control you tightened? No, I said. I also added dual approval requirements for overrides. Priya nodded once, almost to herself. And that's why this stopped today instead of becoming a missing asset report, she said. Then she looked toward the door Megan had gone through. And that's also why, she added, she tried to solve it with keys. I sat there, feeling something shift again. Another small, sharp click in my head. Because I understood it now. Megan didn't panic because she was accused. She panicked because the shortcuts stopped working. And when shortcuts die, people who live on shortcuts start burning down the room. As the meeting continued, my phone buzzed once more. A simple notification from the access platform. Account disabled. Megan L. 1 minute later, privilege removed. Mark D. Facilities Admin. And then the final one. Quiet, almost polite. Security hold confirmed. Footage retained 90 days. I looked at the screen, then put my phone face down. Because I could already tell what tomorrow would feel like. Not peace yet, but consequences. The kind that don't need yelling to be heard. The strangest part wasn't the meeting. It was the hour after. If you've ever watched someone powerful get cut down by policy, you know the feeling. The office doesn't explode. It doesn't cheer. It goes quiet, like the building itself is holding its breath, waiting to see who's next. By 3:10 p.m., the rumor stream was already running, but it was running carefully. People weren't saying Megan got walked out. They were saying compliance is involved. That phrase makes adults behave. I went back to my desk and opened my inbox. There were 7 new emails. All of them had the same tone. Polished, cautious, suddenly respectful. Fleet Ops sent one first. Subject: Fleet Asset Custody Confirmation. Ethan Harris. It was a 1-page PDF with my vehicle assignment, my plate, and the effective dates, signed by Dana. Not just current assignment, but a full custody chain, like they were sealing it in glass. Security followed. Subject: Incident report finalized. Garage gate. Interference. Frank attached the incident number, the timestamp range, and confirmation that the footage was under retention hold. It included one line that felt like a quiet apology from the building itself. Employee Ethan Harris remained compliant and cooperative. No aggressive behavior observed. Then HR, not Lydia. Not a generic mailbox. Brian forwarded it to me with a 2-word note. For your records. The HR email was short and legal sounding. Following today's events, we confirm that no disciplinary action is being taken against you in relation to the parking garage incident. No, we're sorry. No, you didn't deserve this. Just a clean sentence that did what it needed to do. I stared at it for a long moment and felt something I hadn't felt all day. Not triumph, relief, because that was the part Megan was trying to steal. My reputation, my stability, the invisible trust that takes years to build and 10 minutes to destroy. And now it was documented. At 4:05 p.m., Priya from compliance sent the final message of the day. Subject: case update. Interim controls implemented. It outlined 3 immediate actions. All fleet reassignment and vehicle access overrides now required fleet plus security approval in writing. Facilities no longer had administrative permissions that could affect fleet custody records. A quarterly audit would be conducted to identify any other unauthorized custody changes. There was one final line at the bottom, almost human for someone like Priya. Thank you for following process and preserving evidence. I read it twice. Then I leaned back in my chair, and for the first time that day, I let myself feel the weight of what almost happened. Because if I'd reacted the way Megan expected, if I'd gotten out of the car, argued, grabbed my phone, raised my voice, this would have turned into a different story, a messy story. The kind where HR says both parties contributed, the kind where the loudest person survives. Instead, I'd stayed still. I'd forced the situation into the only arena where Megan couldn't perform, documentation. The next morning, I came in early again, not because I loved mornings, because I wanted to see it with my own eyes. Same ramp, same concrete walls, same harsh garage lights. But the air felt different. It felt normal. I approached the gate slowly, half expecting something, another stunt, another confrontation, another misunderstanding. The scanner read my plate. The light turned green. The gate lifted smoothly. No blockage. No silhouette standing in front of my hood. No handout for my keys. Just the quiet mechanical hum of a system doing exactly what it was designed to do. I parked, shut off the engine, and sat there for a second with my hands on the wheel. And that's when it hit me. I hadn't slept properly in weeks. Not because I knew something was wrong, because my body did. When you work around access systems, you learn that control isn't just power, it's safety. And when someone starts reaching for your control with a smile on their face, it messes with you in a way you don't notice until it's over. I grabbed my coffee and walked toward the elevator. On the way, I passed the security desk. Frank looked up and gave me a small nod. Not friendly, not dramatic, just acknowledgement. You good? He asked. Yeah, I said. I'm good. Upstairs, the office was already buzzing with that fake brightness people put on after something ugly happens. People were overly polite. Conversations stopped when I walked by. Brian pulled me aside around 9:20. He didn't apologize the way I wanted him to. Managers like Brian rarely do. Apologies admit they failed to protect you. But he did something more useful. He spoke carefully, like every word had been approved in his head first. I'm glad you handled it the way you did, he said. Compliance told me you stayed professional. I nodded. I didn't handle it for praise. I handled it so it couldn't be rewritten. Brian exhaled like that sentence stung because it was true. Then he said, We're restructuring facilities oversight. Your access scope is being formalized under fleet operations moving forward. Dana requested you be a direct liaison. That surprised me, because it wasn't a gift. It was recognition that what I managed wasn't just a gate. It was liability, custody, risk. And if the company was going to pretend it cared about risk, it needed people who actually did. Later that week, I received one more email, this one from legal. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a courtroom scene. It was a summary. Mark had provided a written statement. It contradicted the logs. Megan's statement contradicted the video. Rick admitted he approved what was put in front of him, believing it was already cleared, and he was placed on corrective action for signing off on things outside his understanding. Megan didn't fight it, because you can't fight a timeline. She resigned effective immediately. That was the language. Mark was removed from any role involving access control and placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Eventually, he was quietly exited. No party announcement. No announcement at all. Just gone. And the policy changes stayed. That was the real victory. Not watching people fall. Watching the shortcut disappear. A month later, I got to the garage at 6 a.m. again. I was tired. It had been a long week. I'd been running audits, updating controls, rebuilding processes that should have existed in the first place. I pulled up to the gate and watched it lift like it was supposed to. And I thought about Megan, standing there that first morning, demanding keys with absolute confidence. She wasn't confident because she was right. She was confident because she thought truth was negotiable. She thought the story belonged to whoever told it loudest. She thought management was a weapon. But she didn't understand something simple. Access is not a vibe, it's a record. And records don't care who smiles. As I drove into the garage, I realized something else too. Something quieter, more personal. I hadn't won because I got revenge. I'd won because I stopped trying to be the nice guy who absorbs other people's chaos. I stopped being a victim of someone else's narrative. I became the person who writes it down first, and that's the part that still feels satisfying, even now. She blocked my car at 6 a.m. and demanded the keys. I said, okay. Not because I was giving in, because I'd already changed the access. And the moment she tried to force the old rules, the system told the truth for me.